The Department of Education has introduced several different strategies to identify student malpractice for both the selective high school exam and the opportunity test. Malpractice is the act of deliberately doing the wrong thing in the exam, also known as cheating. I'm going to go through the extensive list of what actions this can mean, which constitutes cheating or malpractice, but the most common ones that most people come to mind is answering questions after the exam time or looking at someone's work. That's what we typically expect, but what else can constitute cheating, and how do we prevent not getting banned or lose marks completely in these important exams? Let's get into it. The department has anti-malpractice measures to make sure that no student receives an unfair advantage or causes disadvantage to other students. Even beyond these two exams that I mentioned, the selective and the opportunity class test, most tests that students complete here in New South Wales will have most, or if not all, of these measures in place in differing extents. The HAST and scholarship exams are going to be quite similar, and even the HSC and exams at university will be comparable to what I'll be going through in today's video. Students sitting the test for placement into selective high schools or opportunity classes are required to observe the test rules and guidelines and avoid any irregular conduct that disrupts other students. This ultimately includes anything that can be considered as cheating or malpractice. The notice to candidate sheet, which is displayed outside all examination rooms, warns students of the consequences of such actions and acts as a reminder. I don't suggest students to slowly read this prior to the actual exam, which is why I thought it would probably be better to make a video and get students familiarized with what they need to expect. Imagine if you have the selective exam and that's only when you're looking at the rules and the notice to candidates on what you should be and allowed to be doing in the actual exam. It's not an efficient use of your time going into the exam, and you're probably going to cram your mind with points that aren't going to help you in the exam as well. So what are some examples of cheating or malpractice? The list is quite extensive, but the first one that comes to mind to most people is continuing to answer questions after the allocated test time. That is why it's very important when they say pens down, you have to put your pens down or your pencils down. At home, you can be a little bit more flexible. If it's a 30-minute test, you can do 35 minutes or 32 minutes, but in the actual exam, you have to be strict with what the test says. You cannot go over, otherwise it's considered as malpractice. You can lose all your marks. The second example is copying answers from another student during the test. So for the selective school exam this year, it will be allocated from our point of view. You'll be doing the test at your own school. If you're in a public school, that is. If you're in an independent or private school, you'll be going to a local public school to do that exam. And if you're looking at the student's work next to you and try to copy their multiple choice or their writing tasks and you're caught, that's considered malpractice. Number 3, collaboration or attempted collaboration between students during test time. So this is when you're talking to other students and trying to help each other. If you're communicating at all during the test, you will lose marks. Another example is using or trying to use unauthorized material during testing, and this can include notes, study guides, mobile phones, electronic devices, calculators for the maths test, and so forth. Any disruptive behavior or not following the instructions of a supervisor presiding the test is considered cheating. And the last two consist of student impersonation. So if your name is Jill and you don't really want to do the exam and you get your older brother to do it, that's considered cheating. And another one is any form of cheating at all to get an unfair advantage are examples of malpractice and cheating and are things that you should be avoiding. Some of the things that I mentioned is already considered common knowledge, yet we still see hundreds of students cheating and getting caught in very large exams such as the high school certificate or the HSC in Year 12. If you're not too sure what that exam is, the HSC is an important exam in Year 12 where it will determine which university or if you can even go to university in the first place. For reference, the HSC is a very large exam and It is considered the most important exam for students in primary school and high school that will ultimately they will have to complete. The better your ATAR, which is the score that you get in these HSC exams, the better the degree that you might be able to enter. As a result, students are compelled to bend the rules and participate in malpractice or cheating, and we see this trend rising. There have been 842 offences involving 739 students in 2020. This means there was a portion of students who cheated more than once and were caught for it. This is an increase from 2019, so just a year earlier, where there were 671 offences involving 595 students. So if there are an increasing number of students that are cheating in huge exams like the HSC exam, there will bound to be some students that will also be considering and will be caught cheating in the OC and selective test as well. I want to be clear that I don't know what the exact number it is for the OC or selective exam, as this is not publicly available on Malpractice, but we can guess that it would probably be less than 100 considering the number of students that are doing these exams. If you are watching this video and plan to do it soon, I can't force you to do anything, but I strongly advise against considering cheating in the first place or being part of this statistic. We can see this from the increasing number of students who are caught cheating in the HSC, that it can either mean one of two things. Number one, more students are cheating, or it can mean that the Department of Education's cheating detection system is becoming even better over time. If students who are older than you in Year 12 are getting caught, how do you think that you can get away with it if you're in Year 6 or if you're in Year 4? Chances are going to be very slim. This leads on to another reason why you shouldn't cheat or participate in malpractice in these exams, is that it creates a really bad habit that you don't want to foster. You may get away with it this time around, but you will fall into the temptation in the future to do it again and again. And in an actual exam in high school, you would do it too. In a half-yearly test, you would do it until you finally get caught and you regret your decisions and you face the realization that you needed to study so much more to even catch up to the students in your grade because you kept cheating. You will realize that your natural gifts are not good enough to compete in an OC class or a selective high school if you manage to get away with it, and you will quickly fall behind. There is no magic trick or technique with getting smart and getting great marks. Although there are ways to be tactical in reaching your goals, but getting great marks ultimately takes great work. You can't bend the rules by participating in cheating or malpractice. It's not worth it. So now that we know the main reasons to not cheat in exams, I will then go over how malpractice can be identified on the day of the test from the Department of Education's point of view. This is ultimately through two different ways. Number one, the staff observes the student, so they watch them, and if they see them breach the test rules and guidelines, or they engage in irregular conduct that's very different to the other students. Or number two, a student is looking at another student or students that are breaking the rules or guidelines, and they report it to the actual staff, and then they'll follow up. When malpractice is reported, the staff will complete this as an incident report, which will then be investigated by a malpractice panel. Ultimately, there's going to be two outcomes where you will either lose a large percentage of your marks, so you might lose 50% of your mark, or you might lose 100% of the mark. But imagine if you lost 50% of the mark, chances are you will not get into the OC or selective class if you lose 50% in a single exam. There is also a process for after the exam where they will use statistical analysis to see whether students are cheating after the test, if they were not caught during the exam. Personally, I don't really think they're able to find this with certainty, whether someone has cheated after the exam if there wasn't any proof during the exam. But if there is a hunch already of cheating occurring, they can use this to confirm their suspicion. For instance, let's say that a student was potentially looking at another student's work. The exam organizer or the test practitioner on the day has the feeling but does not know for sure whether that student was looking at that other person's work. So then they'll use a post-test investigation. They might compare the multiple choice options, and if there is a high degree of similarity between the two, different exams, they are then able to confirm their hunch or the suspicion that cheating may have occurred. Although this won't really work if the person cheating only copied one answer, as the other answers may be quite different to the actual test. In more detail, and what the actual Department of Education website says, potential malpractice is identified through statistical analysis on the results of individual students, pairs, and groups of students in the same test center venue. The analysis compares, but is not limited to, number 1, the similarity of the response patterns between 2 or more students. Number 2, the performance on one test paper in comparison to performance on other test papers, which I've mentioned already. And number 3, investigation and consequence of malpractice. Each potential malpractice case is reviewed by a malpractice panel, which considers all available evidence. Where malpractice is confirmed, parents will be immediately informed. In these cases, students will not be offered a placement and their scores will be withheld. Parents will be advised of an appeal process should they wish to appeal the decision. Overall, it is not worth cheating in exams, especially in the selective and OC test, as we know that it has far-reaching consequences beyond just the exam and not getting any marks at all. Also, your parents are going to find out and they're going to feel really disappointed if they notice that you are cheating or involved in a cheating incident. It can also develop a really bad habit, even if you do manage to get away with it during a test, as there are multiple methods during the actual exam as well as after the actual exam for the Department of Education to determine if students have cheated. I know that exams like the OC test and the selective exam are so important and so many people are actually practicing for it. But it's much better to work hard and try your best than to resort to these methods. Work hard and don't cut the corners and don't cheat, and ultimately you will feel much better off, regardless of whether you make it in or not. I hope you guys like this video. If you like this type of video, or if you had a suggestion on what topic I should follow, write it down in the comments below and I'll love to do a bit of a breakdown.